And we're back. Hope you enjoyed my little a cappella rendition of the credits song. That is close to the actual words, but obviously I changed it a little bit. It's actually like, here in my midnight ballroom, fairy it haunts us all, which seems fitting for my whole vibe. But that part of the song, and the song in general, but like especially the chorus, which is where that part is from, is very much about me as a young trans person trying to figure out how does my relationship to my pagan religion and my gods, specifically the one I call the horned god, turned out to be Gwyn, but also the horned god. Both things were true. And for my Minoan friends, guess who showed up? Iava / Minos. Yeah, him. My mysterious moon man. He's one of the gods in Minoan paganism, the specific Minoan-based tradition I follow. But also, I've known him for years as one of my characters / one of the gods of my world, Arleil. And he's very recently said, "Hello, yes, I've also been Minos this whole time." I'm like, yes, you have. I can feel it. Like, I have this thing where I can sense who a god is or who a spirit is, and I didn't initially realize that was rare in the pagan community. But it seems to be, but it doesn't mean that I perfectly hear or see things in the spirit world all the time. It's just like, oh, so-and-so has entered the chat. It's just like that. Like, I have pretty good caller ID. Now, what they say might be hard to tell, but I'm like, oh yeah, that's so-and-so. I don't know how I know, but I just can't deny to myself that that is so-and-so. I hope I explained it well, but anyway. So, Gwyn has been encouraging me to look deep down at the energy or like soul signature, whatever you want to call it, of him and various other gods who are kind of faces of his or can be. And Minos is one of those. And that was also how I was encouraged to see or like prove to myself the connection between Minos and my character / Arlean god, Iava. And I'm doing air quotes around character because like I view my characters as spirit companions and the gods as like deities who just happen to be in a story that I was inspired to write as opposed to an ancient story. So, and that's not unique to my characters. I kind of view all characters like that. I just have a really close spirit worker type relationship with mine. Even before I knew what I was doing as a spirit worker, like I was Christian and I had no idea what I was doing, but I was still connecting with these characters basically as a little spirit worker witch in training. So yeah, anyway, the song, the chorus of In My Midnight Ballroom, I can't remember the exact name of the song, but Iava shows up and like in his role at the time as one of the faces of my horned god, and helps me understand some things about my connection to him and who I am as a devotee if I end up being a guy instead of a girl, because I was going through a lot of that at the time, so I had to like reinvent all the archetypes that I thought I connected to when I realized, oh, I'm trans. And it was a fairly late realization too, like it was in my mid to late 20s. So I'd already built a lot of my inner dreamscape and world and self-image. So right, so I wanted to go through a lot of my the blurbs that I wrote about my songs and stuff, and just see if there's anything I wanted to add. And partly I just like the idea of just getting to say them on camera. Might not do all of them, but you know. Coffee break. Also relight my incense break. You can't see it, but that's what I'm doing. Wow. Quite a bit shorter than last time. Well, that's good. I enjoy the like smoke going up on camera. So, back to this tab that I had open. The longest of the blurbs is the album intro, as you might imagine. So I'm just reading from my Bandcamp page. In the summer of 2020, amidst a global pandemic, I did the unthinkable. I fled my abuser, a person I'd cared about for almost 10 years. In doing so, I had to leave behind a marriage, an entire shared life, and the hope that my spouse and I would grow old together. Making that escape was the most terrifying and heart-wrenching thing I've ever done. Despite limited earthly resources, I had the aid of gods from multiple pantheons, a cross-national array of witches and inspired ones, and a very supportive Baptist preacher, my wonderful Uncle Bub. Before I go on, I want to especially thank my good friend, Peep. It's not their name, it's the name of their cat, but that's what I'm calling them for anonymity, who drove the getaway car and kept me sane with phone calls every night. And I don't make comments about sanity or mental illness or mental health lightly. I thought about, do I want to use that phrase? And I was like, yeah, it feels appropriate here. But there was one person who stayed with me even when other allies couldn't, and that was my patron god, my fairy king, my beloved. It was Gwyn ap Nudd, to whom I took vows of dedication and sacred marriage. His love and kindness gave me the strength and clarity to admit that I was being abused, and to leave my ex. Stepping into the unknown. With Gwyn's help, I've been able to heal, grieve, and let go. And it is in devotion to him that I present this album, but at the same time, I'm doing this for me. So this album tells the story of my escape and healing over that summer. I think in stories, so you'll often hear me pull in references to myths and fairy tales, shoujo anime, and science fiction, especially Madoka Magica. far and away the most common reference I make. You'll hear more about that later. And then, continuing to read, and then because I'm Gwyn's Awanydd, which means inspired one, it's a Welsh word, I weave them together, the stories. I weave them together into the tale of my personal mythos. And then I have a little bit about how the tracks were recorded and how I'm trying not to worry too much about the occasional wrong note or background noise, but focus on expressing the emotional story through my voice. And I think that I was able to do that. It's very freeing not to worry about perfection, which is not achievable by humans, but it's still really good. And then I have some stuff about the album cover art. There's an image description, so I'll read that first. Inside a square black frame, we see a gradient of purple and blue with a star-like flare in the upper left corner. On one side of the image, there's an atmospheric photograph of a red glazed coffee mug and a silver ring with antlers resting on top of a red and black crocheted garment. Is that my Vicaro Cardi? Yes, it is. The mug has the profile of a face etched into the glaze, and another flare has been added to resemble a bright tear on the cheek of the face. The antlered ring, this one I'm wearing, rests on top of a mirrored surface inside a small container, and underneath the ring we see a chip of red glaze, which has fallen off the brim of the mug. On the other half of the cover art, next to the photo, are these words: "You are not my Gwythyr," with watercolor-like staining on the text. Most of the words are purple and white, but the word "not" is stained red. Underneath, in a light to dark blue gradient, is the text, "Thorn Silver Holly Song, in devotion to Gwyn ap Nudd." Then it has a little bit about the cover. On the last day I saw my ex, I went back to our shared apartment to reclaim some of my things. I hadn't yet told them I was leaving for good, because I wanted to get myself and my stuff safely out before risking their reaction. After packing up several boxes, the final thing was a bag of my mugs. My ex lifted it roughly into the cart, and my red glazed mug suffered the chip you can see on the cover. They looked more irritated than contrite. Sorry, I didn't realize it was fragile. They always looked so annoyed when I had problems. Even if I just mentioned it and said like just I'm having a rough day. Like if I wasn't asking them for anything, it was just like I would mention it and they'd be like, they'd have this look like, oh no, almost like they were constipated. So continuing to read. Yes, I thought, you didn't realize or care that it was fragile, and that's why you've broken our marriage. A few weeks earlier, my ring had broken, the placeholder ring I'd been wearing for Gwyn ever since we decided to call ourselves married. So I bought a new one, which you see pictured, but wasn't expecting it to arrive until later that month. It arrived the day before I went back to that apartment for the last time. And I did tell that story in a previous episode, so you might remember it from there. I'd been planning to put those things on the cover and to tell that story for so long that it's like, it just feels like a lot to finally have it out there. the family member I mentioned before who always liked my ex a lot, and I don't blame them. I'm like, my ex was very charming at times, especially around this family member, but like, now that the truth has come out, come on. But in any case, this family member kept telling me, oh, we can glue that shit back on to your mug, and at first I was like, well, I guess so, but now I'm like, no, I don't want that. Like, ask me what I want. It's powerful. It shows. It's a visceral depiction of the fact that something fragile has been broken, and you can't just glue it back together and pretend that everything's fine. So no. And so the first track is called Sundown. It takes place on the day of Calan Mai, which I think some of my blurbs I won't necessarily read word for word, but this was the experience of my first Calan Mai, where in my tradition Gwyn dies for the summer, and I knew that I had still been talking to him during the previous summer, when I was like, okay, so clearly he can be around even though he's dead, and I can like talk to him like I do normally with gods. But I was like, but it still feels different now that I know what's happening on May 1st for him. And it was pretty intense. Like I felt a lot of his story that he shared with me that happens on that day when he faces his rival and gets killed for the summer and loses so the goddess Creidolad changes from being with him during the winter to being with Gwythyr, the same Gwythyr from the title of the album, during the summer, because she kind of represents the fertility of the earth. And so even though I don't have personal affection for Gwythyr, I recognize him as a worthy god and a worthy other partner for Creidolad. But my ex was not my Gwythyr. So like I'm also much like, not to compare myself to Creidolad, but like I'm also married to Gwyn. But I don't have, there's no like worthy rival that can stand up to him that he'd be willing to share my heart with. And he did tell me that he was rooting for me for my marriage to my ex, and was really sad that he had to take me away from it, which was really nice. Like, it showed me that he really wanted what's best for me. Like, so I have gotten more compassion and sympathy and like understanding from this old pagan god than from my human Christian relatives, some of them. So I'm just like, it's hard because I know they wouldn't think that my relationship to him is good, or like the fact that I'm a pagan, they're not crazy about. But still, I'm like, well, look at how he treats me versus how y'all do. Also, he recognizes my gender as real and my lived experience. takes my concerns seriously. Taught me how to set boundaries. He even pulled in a god who's like, I feel like there's history with the Greek and Roman gods because of the Roman invasion of Britain, and Gwyn is a Welsh god. But he still got help from Hades to teach me how to set boundaries, because as he put it, he's like a trauma surgeon. Gwyn is like that. This is how he just described the situation to me. He was like, okay, I'm like a trauma surgeon who brought you into my hospital and realized that I need a specialist for this certain thing that I can do, but I'm not the best at it, so I went and got the very best, no matter who that is. And like, Gwyn is so different from my ex, and just in terms of putting aside personal pride in order to help me instead of worrying about how he's gonna look to other people. Because my ex was really active in the activist community and cared a lot about, seemed like, cared a lot about how they looked to other people, but didn't actually listen to what I needed. They wanted to look like they were taking care of me, but not really. So, anyway, I had a really cool experience during the evening of that first Cullen Mai. I didn't actually know yet that I was being abused. Like, I knew something was wrong, but I hadn't fully admitted it to myself, and I was just kind of dealing with all this difficult pagan stuff. Oh yeah, maximum file size warning again. I was just dealing with all this difficult pagan stuff alone, because, like, I tried to tell my ex, hey, just so you know, I'm having a difficult time, and I didn't want to, like, I should have been able to expect that my partner would listen to me if I needed emotional support, but by that point I was like, no, it's just gonna annoy them, so I just wanted to let them know why I might not seem perfectly cheerful or something, or might not be up to much. And they still got that look like, oh no, Thorne's asking me for something, even though I really wasn't by that point. But I said, just so you know, today is kind of like my Good Friday, because I knew that they were Christian, and we both had that Christian background. And I said, but my Easter doesn't come until October. So I just wanted to let them know, like, the scale of what was happening for me. Comparing it to the death and resurrection of Jesus. But that's only 3 days. And it's like a memory. Whereas in mythic time, like in pagan stuff, a lot of times there's like mythic or circular time where these things do happen every year in a way. So I'm like, no, but it is actually happening, and it's longer. So anyway, I had a really cool I took a walk with Gwen around the neighborhood and got to just kind of touch base before the day ended. He kept me away from, like, spiritually going to that to the battlefield of him and Gwythyr, or like imagining it. And I think now it's because he didn't want me to have to deal with that when I was already kind of fighting without knowing it, for my own safety too. But also just, I'm glad that he didn't want to, he didn't want to give me more than I could handle. And that sounds so Christian. I wish he didn't trust me so much. But no, I think it's awesome. But he has trusted me with a lot and given me the strength to handle things, or been the support I need to gain that strength and healing to handle things. And that night, I was standing there making tea, as I said in the song, and he suddenly showed up. I think he looked like half skeletal, but he still had the long white hair. And he was just like, he just seemed very tired and kind of like almost like not quite all there mentally. Like I wasn't quite worried. I wasn't worried about him, but I was just like, wow, he's really almost a little bit out of it. And he started singing, "You Are My Sunshine, My Only Sunshine." I was like, oh my god, my heart. And then he asked me to make him some tea, and I did, and we just like had a moment. It's really hard to explain, so I put it into music. And let's move on to the next song. This might be a long episode. There might be more than 2 parts, just But I think I've earned it. The next one is Just Breathe, parentheses, A Doll's Prayer, because those were originally 2 songs, and I stuck A Doll's Prayer, because it's really short, onto the front of Just Breathe, and then combined them with a cadence. Like, on the piano, it's a series of chords. Cadence. And A Doll's Prayer is basically, it's not directly set in the Rosin Maiden anime, but it's heavily inspired by that idea of like, Rosin Maiden is a shoujo anime about a bunch of porcelain dolls with like really awesome, fancy Victorian style dresses. Like they're that type of doll that you would have tea parties with or something, and they just happen to be the living beings. Like if they have a human who's willing to wind the key in their back, then they can wake up from their slumber and just like chill. They're some of them are more chill than others. They have very strong opinions sometimes, but like they're trying to figure out how to become a real girl and get back to their father, the doll maker. So I just kind of had that in my mind, as well as this one Christian children's book where God the Father is imagined as a toy maker, and I was like, yeah, it's like an established tradition of imagining a nurturing deity as the maker of these like toys or dolls that are us or something like that. So yeah, I'm just gonna go with that. And then the second one, Just Breathe, has influence from Rosin Maiden, but also heavily from the Madoka Magica anime. And I am gonna spoil a bit. Like it's an old anime by this point, but spoilers for that. And I compare Gwyn to Goddess Madoka because he's a very kind psychopomp who comes to gather the souls of his witches, which is literally what Madoka does at the end. And Gwyn also has a weird relationship with time, and he's been here all through the ages at this point, and is associated with the color white and shining light, and he probably has a bow, like the bow and arrow kind. I wouldn't be surprised if he has a hair bow too. It occurs to me that Madoka has both types of bows. And sometimes to remind me to hope, because Madoka is all about hope, Gwyn pulls up. I have a Spotify playlist for him that is set on random, so he can bring up certain songs if he wants me to think about their message, like just as we're talking or as I'm listening to the playlist. So sometimes he'll pull up the theme that's basically for Goddess Madoka when she's doing her whole "I have no reason to despair" thing, and like saving all of the witches. The theme is called Sagitta Luminous Bright Arrow, I think, or Arrow of Light, and it's so, like, it makes me cry, but in a good way, like in a heartwarming way, which is weird because it's in a major key, and major key songs don't usually touch me that way, but this one does. And so I was thinking a lot about that, and how I'm kind of like Homura because I'm all about him, and like I would go through like 1,000 years of time looping for him. That's not the most healthy thing to know about myself, but I know that I would, and I don't think he'd let me, but it's kind of cool knowing, yeah, he is worth it to me. So and I guess I talk a lot about just why I feel like my story is kind of similar to, well, there are some ways in which I'm similar to Homura or like the magical girls from that series. I talk about that more in the blurb and like in the actual song of this one and the next one, actually. But another cool thing about this song is it's a sister song to one that's later on the album called Lord of My Dance. I thought about calling it Just Dance, but I was like, that might step on some toes, because I already have the phrase Just Dance a lot in the song, and I don't want to get into trouble. But this way, Lord of My Dance kind of echoes the Lord of the Dance, which I think is a song that has been written to be both about Jesus and like the horned god. So yeah, it fits. And they're sister songs because they use basically the same melody, and I echoed the lyrics wherever I could, but the piano part is very different. I wanted them to have completely different characters in terms of the musical character. So I can talk about my songs and like what thought process went into writing them, both musically and emotionally, and like the technical aspects, both the technical and the inspiration aspects, for a long time, but I don't want to spin forever on that right now. So there are some influences in Just Breathe from the third Madoka movie, I think it's called the Rebellion story. So when I mention my handprint staining his marble image brilliant red, that's referring to an interaction that Homer has in that movie with like a marble statue that represents goddess Madoka. And also the phrase "good for nothing," which that's from that. And it's interesting. These two songs were actually written first of all of the album, except the bonus track. So I didn't know what was going to befall, or that I was in an abusive situation, but especially with Just Breathe, I was just like, okay, we're going into lockdown. I don't know what's happening. I'm kind of anxious about how things will go, but I just have to breathe and be with Gwen. So at some point I may do another little ending song and go into the third part. But first, the girl in the yellow dress. It's fairly early in the track list. It's only the third track, but I wrote it quite a while later. Like I was at my parents' house by that time, but it's based on a journey vision thing that I had with Gwen much earlier. And I won't say all of that, except that it heavily uses imagery from Madoka, but in kind of a unusual way. The interesting thing was that I saw another person in that vision who I didn't know who they were at first, but it turned out to be my shadow, I was told. And I asked Gwen later, so why is my shadow wearing yellow of all colors? And he said, because it's a color you would never wear. And he's right. No shade to people who like yellow. I'm just like, I would never wear yellow. Like a yellow themed magical girl outfit is not something that would fit with me. So if you want to tell me, yes, this is a shadow of you, then yeah, that works. Okay, I think we're gonna go into part 3, partly because I have to take a bio break, because all this coffee has to go somewhere. So anyway, here in my midnight ballroom, it's time for the end of part 2.